Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 10:08 a.m. on the 3rd of April 2025 and the sun's come out to play a little bit, but I think it's still going to rain a bit later on today. We're not there yet, getting our sunshine back in our sunshine state. Who knew, people of Earth? Just going to put the aircon on, it's hot at this corner. Rati is here cleaning, so there'll be, just a few interruptions when I have to get out of here while she, vacuums and mops the floor, but that's okay. I asked her for permission if she minded if I make a video. Because I want to kind of complete this chapter, and part 3 is, I had to chop it up into 3 videos. Part 3 of When Angels Intervene. Gee, it's really steamy in this corner. It's quite humid. Anyway, let us continue, beautiful people of planet Earth and all other interdimensional entities and all sentient beings. In fact, all our relations, all that exists here on planet Earth and in the cosmos as well. Right. Alan, 43, Illinois, USA. After my wife left me, I spent most of my time drinking. I was really depressed and I used that as an excuse. But really, I was turning into an alcoholic. I would wake up with a hangover, have a few drinks at lunchtime to get over it, then drink all evening. At home, I would drink a 6-pack of beer, then move on to the whiskey while I was sitting there watching television. I was letting myself fall apart and blaming my wife for going. But the truth is, she had a good reason for going. I was already drinking too much before she left, and that was one of her problems with me. I managed to hang on to my job somehow, even though I was often a bit drunk in the afternoons. But one Friday, my boss gave me a formal warning for being late and for not getting all my work done. I was in real danger of losing the job and going into a total decline. I drank all weekend and had a terrible hangover on Monday. I called in sick and started drinking again, just sitting there in the kitchen. I think, left to my own devices, I would have sat there all week until they called me to tell me not to bother coming back. After a few hours, I felt sleepy and I leaned forward onto the table. Then there was a rattle at the door and this man came in. I had no idea how he had gotten into the house or who he was. I asked him something, but he just shook his head at me. He took the bottle of whiskey off the table and started pouring it down the drain. I shouted at him, but he gave me such a stern glare. I just sat back down. Then he went around the whole house and got every bit of alcohol he could find and poured every drop down that drain. There was a whole pile of empty bottles. Then he left. I just sat there feeling bewildered and empty. I went to bed and fell asleep and woke up at about 6 the next morning. I had a hangover but it wasn't too bad because I had slept so long. I went into work and the first thing I did was go talk to my boss and promise him that he was going to see an improvement. From that day, I stopped drinking completely for years. I have the odd glass or two now that I've gotten my life back together, but I remember clearly how close I was to throwing everything away, and I never get drunk anymore. Caroline, 38, Hong Kong, China. My husband got a job in Hong Kong when I was 30. It was for a minimum of 2 years. It was very well paid, and we felt like it would be a mistake to turn it down. I gave up the job I had at the time in a local solicitor's office, and we both moved there. We didn't have children, so it seemed like an opportunity for some adventure. To start with, I hated it. My husband worked long hours, and we lived on the 30th floor of a high-rise apartment block. I hated the lifts, but the stairs were impossible. I didn't know anyone, and there didn't seem to be any way of meeting anyone other than my husband's colleagues, who I didn't really like. Because I had no friends, I was spending more and more time in the flat, watching incomprehensible television programs and getting more and more depressed. I started to resent my husband and to feel like he had forced me to give up everything to be here. In fact, it had been a decision we made together, but at that stage, he was all right because he was busy all the time. I was the one who was miserable. One day I had a panic attack in the lift. I stopped at 10 floors below our apartment and got out. I stayed there for a while, trying to get my breath back and just to calm down. I was frustrated because I felt like I was becoming more and more helpless. At home, I had been a competent, organised person. Here, I was just a silly, scared girl. I started to walk up the stairs to my apartment, a couple of floors below our apartment. A woman of about my age walked out from the hallway and started walking behind me. She asked if I'd walked all the way, and I told her that I'd gotten scared in the lift and had walked 10 floors. She laughed, but in a nice way, and asked if I wanted to have a coffee and tell her more. She said she was called Kim Smith, and it seemed that she was in a similar position to me. She said that she too was a little bit lost here, and her husband was out all the time. So she came in for coffee, and soon we were talking about everything. She stayed a few hours that day, and we arranged to meet again. We became great friends and started to go out and explore a bit more. I realised that I'd been missing out by not getting out and about much. The city is an amazing place, even if it is a bit intimidating at times. Kim took me to some nice shops, cafes and galleries, excuse me. And in one English cafe, there was a notice board with some adverts. I joined a book club, a book group, and started to make more friends. After a month or so of this, I started to see less of Kim, not because we were less good friends, but because I was busier and she came round less often. I never went to her apartment. She always came to mine. I was happier because I was starting to settle in and I had gotten over my anxieties. One day I realised I hadn't seen her for 2 weeks, so I went looking for her. I asked the concierge where she lived, but he couldn't tell me. There wasn't a family of that name living in the block, especially not two floors down where she had said she lived. I knocked on every door on that floor and she wasn't there. No one had recently moved in or out either. I was a bit worried and a bit disconcerted. Then I got a postcard from her. It was just a funny picture of some children with a little note saying that she was sorry not to have said goodbye, but she hoped that everything was working out for me now, wishing me all the best and saying she was sure we'd meet again sometime. I think back on her with great fondness as she made the transition to that new life so much easier. I ended up having a good couple of years, but it could have been much worse. It seems like a mundane thing for an angel to help with, but I can't help wondering if she was more than just a friend. The way she disappeared was very strange, and it seemed odd that she was there at exactly the moment I needed her most, and then left once the problem was solved. Also, when I try to picture her face, I have a strange sensation. I just see the smile and kind of light, but it's hard to pin down exactly what she looked like. It's very strange and perhaps I'll never really know, but whoever she was a great help to me in a difficult time. Helen, the Cotswolds, England. I've seen angels 3 times in my life, and each time it has been a totally different experience. You asked me about what angels look like, but I don't think I can really tell you. The first time was when I was giving birth to my first child. I had to have an emergency caesarean, and so I was there on an operating table with a curtain hiding the lower half of my body on a local anaesthetic. It is a very strange thing to feel that they are pulling and cutting down there, but not to feel pain. There were quite a few people in the room, several doctors, an anaesthetist, some nurses, and my husband. He wasn't being much use, as he was feeling pretty queasy, but he was doing his best to help anyway. Poor thing. There was also someone else there, a woman who looked quite different from everyone else. She wasn't in surgical gear, and she clearly wasn't quite real. She was standing behind the nurse beside me, smiling down at me. But she was also transparent. I could see the wall behind her. I was a bit confused, but I knew that she was there to look after me. I could tell that no one else could see her. When the baby was born, before they showed it to me, they took it to the table to check it over, and I could tell They were worried for a moment because they seemed to have trouble getting it to breathe. They were very tense and my husband looked worried. The angel just stood there and smiled at me. And I knew it was okay. Then the baby started crying and they all relaxed and brought her over. She had to go into emergency care for observation and the angel went away with her. So I knew she was in good hands. The second time I met angels was when my third child, a daughter, was 3. After 8 years as a housewife and mother, I was going through a difficult time. I felt like no one ever cared about me or noticed me. It's like you become invisible. My husband would come home from work and pick up one of the girls and start playing with her and throwing her around, but he wouldn't come and hug me or talk to me. I had become very depressed and couldn't think of a way out. This particular day, everything had gone wrong from the start. The baby had broken my favourite vase when she was throwing her ball. She had spilled all her food, and then the washing machine broke and water went everywhere, all over the kitchen and hall, so I had to mop all that up. Finally, at about 4 in the afternoon, I couldn't take any more. Annie fell asleep in her room for a nap. I poured some milk and left it for when she woke up, then called my husband's secretary and left a message that he was to come home as soon as he could. Then I just walked out. The elder children were due to be picked up by a friend that day from school, so they would be all right. I started walking up the road with a little bag of clothes. I was running away from home and I had no idea where I was going, except that I couldn't stay. It sounds terrible to walk out on your children like that, but sometimes it is so hard. A man in a car stopped and offered me a lift. He didn't even ask where I was going, and because I didn't care, I just said yes, thinking I'd get as far away as I could. But he started talking to me and asking what I was doing. He had a very trustworthy face. For some reason, I found myself telling him everything. He was sympathetic, but asked me about how the children would feel and how my husband would cope. Then he suggested that I tell my husband more about what I needed. I wasn't sure that would work, but he talked about it all, and the more I talked, the more ridiculous it seemed to just run away. I asked him to turn around and take me home, but it seemed he had just been driving in circles anyway, and we were already right at the end of my road. He took me back, and when we got to the house, the front door was open and there was a woman inside. The man told me she had been looking after Annie, but didn't explain any more than that. Then they both went away, leaving me to think of a sensible story to tell my husband when he got home from work. I was so relieved to see Annie was okay and so full of guilt that I had tried to leave. That time the angels helped me in a very specific way, and they just looked like ordinary people. There was no magical way of fixing things with my husband, but we both tried to make things better, and I learned not to bottle things up so that I didn't get to that state again without, excuse me, without letting him know when I was unhappy. And we've managed to get through and enjoy life overall. The last time I saw angels was entirely different. There was a man who shot a lot of children dead at a school in Hungerford. It didn't directly affect me, but it was all over the news, and my children were the same age as some of those who died. For whatever reason, it had an enormous emotional effect on me, and I found myself crying about it a lot, in between feeling blessed that my children and my family had never suffered that way. I don't go to church much, but I am a believer in my own way, and I went to church on a Thursday to a morning service. I sat there in the church, not really listening to what was going on, but praying inside and listening to the songs and the organ. And when I looked up, I saw that there were angels all around us in that church. You couldn't see their faces, but there were bright, shining figures everywhere I looked. I was really happy to see them, as I felt that they were there to support and protect us. I could see them for quite a long time, and then when I couldn't see them anymore, it didn't matter, because I knew they were still there. So you see, each time was quite different, but each time it was at a critical moment in my life. And in between, I've always known that they were there, even when I couldn't actually see them. Jim, Adelaide, Australia. I had been digging in the garden at the back of my house when I suddenly started to feel a bit strange. I had a crushing pain in my left arm and my chest felt constricted, so I couldn't breathe properly. My house is at the end of a long road, quite away from any neighbours' houses, and my wife had gone over to see her mother, so there was no one home. I remember thinking, I'm having a heart attack, and I tried to get to the house to phone an ambulance. I didn't manage to get far because the pain became excruciating and I collapsed on the grass. I vaguely remember a man standing next to my garden fence, telling me that it was all right and that someone was coming for me. The next thing I knew, my wife was with me and had called an ambulance. She told me that she came as quickly as she could after the doctor had telephoned her to tell her to come home as soon as possible. It was only later, as I recovered in hospital, that I thought, hold on, there was no doctor, and I never gave anyone her mother's number. I think the man by the fence must have been some sort of angel. Elizabeth, the Cotswolds, England. My cottage is quite far away from any others, on the far side of my village. One summer day, a few years ago, I was gardening, something I've always loved doing. I had won prizes for my garden. Suddenly, I got a severe pain in my head that became worse. I felt dizzy and my eyesight went turning everything grey. I think I fell to the ground. I remember being helped by a very kind woman who called an ambulance and got me to the hospital. Apparently, I had had a stroke. When I regained consciousness in the hospital, the woman was sitting beside my bed, holding my hand. She smiled at me, and I felt calm and fell back to sleep. I was still very tired. Next morning I awoke. The woman had gone. I asked the nurses if they had gotten the name of my visitor because I wanted to thank her. The nurses said I had had no visitors since being admitted. My daughter tells me I must have been dreaming, but I never found out who saved me. A woman who had called an ambulance to my address. A woman had called an ambulance to my address, but the hospital workers say I was alone in the garden when they arrived. She must have been some kind of angel. It's comforting to know you're being looked after. Yes, it is. Blessed be. Pascal, 45, Montreal, Canada. I have a problem with my eyesight that goes back to something that happened when I was 20. I got beaten up very badly by a gang. It was ironic because I intervened to save someone who was being robbed on the street. He was being mugged by two guys with knives, and I went up and told them that the police had been called, told them to get lost. But then they followed me, and I unfortunately went down into this underground car park. It was quite late at night, and there were three of them. I was a big, strong guy at 20. But even so, there was nothing I could do. So I got hit and kicked a lot and ended up on the floor with my hand over my face, almost unconscious. I had a couple of broken ribs, a lot of bruising, and worst of all, a fractured skull from a kick in the face. They left me there, and it was a desolate place. No guarantee that anyone would find me, and I was in a bad way. I couldn't see too well. I had blood in one eye, and I guess I was concussed. I started trying to struggle to my feet so I could go get help, but then there was a voice talking to me. It was saying, "It's okay, someone's coming. Don't move, someone's coming." This went on for quite a while, perhaps a quarter of an hour, though it was hard to tell. I thought that meant that help had been called. I couldn't see the person talking or even tell if it was a man or a woman, but they were definitely sitting next to me on the ground. And then I heard someone else, someone different, shout, "Oh my God, what happened? Are you all right?" There were two of them, so one ran to a telephone while the other stayed with me. At the hospital, the doctor told me I could have made my fractured skull a lot worse by getting up and blundering around. As it was, my eye was damaged, and it has deteriorated much more than it should have for my age. But it could have been worse. The people who found me were two young men who happened to be passing. One came to see me the next day at the hospital. He said they'd been worried I might die, and I thanked them effusively for their help. I asked about the first person that had been there, but he said that there was no one. I'd been lying alone on the ground, and it was only by chance that they had come down there, because one of them had left his bag in the car and they had returned to retrieve it. So no one could have known they were coming. Gives you chills, doesn't it? All right, my darling, I'll just move us into the kitchen so Righty can clean and I can carry on. It's okay. It's all good. Right, I'm sitting a bit lower down, but that's okay. It's only temporary. It's darker in here. Luke, Washington, USA. In 1969, I was driving from Seattle to San Francisco in my old station wagon. It was quite a hot day, and I had the window open as I drove along. I came across a hitchhiker, a long-haired boy holding his thumb out to hitch for a ride. The sign he held up said, San Francisco, so I stopped to allow him into the car. We were a good few hundred miles from our destination at that point. As I drove, we talked, and I remember something strange in the way he looked at me. It was as if he could instinctively tell if I was lying, and so I felt compelled to tell him the truth. You see, I was really on the run from Seattle. I'd gotten my girlfriend pregnant, and didn't know what to do about it, so I just left her behind and took off. I had no money, and we had no plans to marry. And in the 1960s, having an illegitimate child was quite a big thing. The boy told me I should go back and face my responsibilities. We stopped for gas and to use the bathroom, and when I came out, he had gone. It just seemed to be this 7-foot glowing tower in front of the station wagon. I heard the boy's voice again in my ear, telling me again to return to Seattle. I did return to Seattle and married my girlfriend Mary 3 months later. We're still together and now have 4 lovely grandchildren. Mary said she had prayed and prayed that I would come back to her. I think the boy hitchhiker must have been some kind of angel answering Mary's prayers. I'm so glad that I went back. I still haven't met anyone quite like Mary. She was always the one for me. And I think the angels must have known it too. Jane, 36, London, England. Quite recently, I was pushing my young son in his stroller near to where I live. There is a side road there that is quite wide, but with a curve close to the end where it meets a main road. I was walking along the main road, crossing the side road. I did take a look down it, but it is a one-way street, and if you can't immediately see a car coming, you generally know that it is safe to cross. Just as I got about halfway across, I heard a car coming extremely fast. It all happened very quickly. I looked to my left and saw a red car coming faster than you would usually expect there at the kind of speed you would expect on a motorway. I wasn't going to have time to get out of the way. I panicked and pushed the stroller as hard as I could, trying to at least get my son out of the way. I started to run after it, but I slipped and stumbled and the stroller bounced horribly off the curb so that it was not clear of the road at all. If anything, it was even more likely to get hit. I was staring at the approaching car when a man walked out from the sidewalk quite deliberately in front of it. I hadn't seen the man a moment earlier, but now he was stepping calmly in front of a speeding car. I realised I could hear a police siren and realised that the red car was being chased by the police, which was why it was going so fast. The man was hit really hard by the red car and seemed to be thrown into the air. At the last moment, the driver tried to brake and swerve. Because of that, he lost control and skidded. The car crashed hard into a lamppost, which was half knocked down, and then bounced back onto the road, coming to a halt only about 10 yards away from me. Meanwhile, I just managed to get back to my feet and ran toward the sidewalk, and a woman ran out and grabbed the stroller before I could get there and dragged that to safety too. The driver of the red car had evidently been hurt in the collision and didn't get out. 3 police cars pulled up in quick succession, and about 10 policemen poured out and surrounded the car. I never found out who the driver was, but they obviously thought he was pretty dangerous. Even though he was injured, they were treating him with real caution. Then I realised that the man who had been hit must be injured. The fact that he had been hit had saved me or my son, or even both, from being hit by the speeding car. I desperately hoped that he wasn't dead. The impact had looked terrible. Slightly hysterical, I started gabbling about him to the woman who had helped get the stroller up on the sidewalk. She hadn't seen him, but I ran off to look for him while she watched my son for me. He was nowhere to be seen. I managed to get some of the policemen to help me look, thinking he might have gone in the front garden or under one of the cars. We scoured the area, but there was no one there. No one seemed to have seen him except me and the driver of the car who had crashed as a result. Later I learned that the driver died as a result of his injuries. I was angry at him for risking my son's life, but you wouldn't wish that on anyone. Even so, that means I was the only one alive who had seen this man deliberately walk out and get hit. There wasn't a trace of him there or anywhere. I think the police thought I was just hysterical, but I definitely saw him, and it was because of him that the car diverted. I'm convinced it was an angel who didn't want me or my son to die that day. Karen, 42, Washington, USA. A few years ago, I was living in an old building in town with my girlfriend Susie. The building wasn't very well maintained. The heat was always breaking down, and the landlords were never in any hurry to fix it. A few times we'd noticed the smell of gas in our apartment coming from the old water heater that was in the hallway. We told the landlords about it, but all they did was send their maintenance guy round. He waved a few matches around and told us there was nothing wrong. The problem came at the start of winter. I'm not sure if the boiler got worse or if it was because we'd had it on for a long time and also had all the windows closed. Susie and I had both been to work, and then we'd come home and had some food in the kitchen. Afterward, we sat in the living room, which opened onto the hallway, watching television. We were both pretty tired from work, and I wasn't that surprised that we were both yawning. I had a kind of tight feeling in my chest, but no more than that. Then I started feeling really sleepy, and I lay back in the chair. Susie was doing the same thing, and I was vaguely wondering if we should turn the lights out and go to bed, when I guess I fell asleep. I'm not sure how long I was actually sleeping, probably an hour or so, but I was woken up by this very insistent voice saying, "Karen, wake up now," over and over. I thought for a moment it was Susie, but it was a different voice, a voice I definitely recognised, although I couldn't tell you who it was. I struggled to wake up. I felt really heavy and I couldn't breathe. Are you ready for me to go? Okay. Let me just move this again. It's wet. Okay. Thank you. Tiptoe through the tulips. Right, here we go. I managed to struggle to my feet, and I realised that Susie was slumped sideways on her chair. I shook her really hard and she hardly moved. Excuse me. Excuse me. I was feeling very dizzy now that I had stood up. I ran to the window and managed to get it open and took a few really deep breaths of the cold air. Then I ran back and got my hands under Susie's shoulders and pulled her off the chair. She woke up slightly and grumbled, but I kept pulling her out through the hall to the kitchen. There was a door in the kitchen that opened to the outside. I put Susie on the floor and opened the door. Then I pulled her head right outside in the cold air on the staircase and started shaking her again. Then she finally woke up. We both had terrible headaches, and our whole bodies felt a bit strange for a day or so. But there wasn't any lasting damage. That night we stayed with friends. Next day we talked to the landlords, and strangely enough, they got the boiler fixed pretty damn quickly. It turned out that there was a leak, but also the extraction system was completely blocked, so all the gas escaping was backing up into our hallway. We'd been pretty lucky to survive, as people do die that way, indeed. We moved out as soon as we could anyway, as we both felt anxious in that apartment. Susie would never believe me about the voice. She thinks I was hallucinating because of the gas. But I know what I heard. It was someone I knew well, but have never met, who knew my name. And they saved us. It wasn't just luck that I woke up. There was more to it than that. Martin, 39, Penrith, England. When I was 20, I had an experience up on the Pennines that convinced me that I have a guardian angel. I suppose we all have one, but that was the time I met mine. I had gone to walk up Cross Fell, which is the tallest of the hills in this part of the Pennines. I'd been up before, but never to the very top, so I set off early one Sunday in April. I knew enough to take a supply of water and food in my rucksack, but I was a bit underdressed. I had a sweater but no coat, as it was such a sunny day. It was a warm, hot day at ground level, but it got a bit cooler as I walked up. There is a path that goes almost all the way to the peak, so all you have to do is follow that. Every now and then I would stop to look down on the countryside below. It's a fantastic view across to the lakes and the peaks. There's no one up there but a few sheep, so it feels great to be there. I saw a few hawks below me and even a hare, which is something you don't see very often. At about 11 a.m, I saw a bank of cloud coming in from the west. That's always a slight worry on the Pennines, as the peaks are high enough that they are often completely covered by cloud. But I was only an hour or so from the top, so I decided to keep going. Not a very good decision, but there you go. I looked back now and then, meaning to turn back if the cloud got too close, but at the same time, I was pushing myself to try and get higher. Finally, when I was probably no great distance from the top, I looked back and saw that the cloud was getting close. Reluctantly, I turned back and started walking down the hill. but the cloud was coming pretty fast, and soon it started coming down around me. It was like going from a sunny day to a dense fog within about 10 minutes. It was a very wet, cold fog, and I couldn't see more than about 10 yards in front of my face. Just before it came down, I was on a part of the path that loops in a big curve around the edge of a scree slope. It seemed to me that if I went down the slope, I would get down the hill faster and couldn't miss the path. Now this is the sort of thing you are told over and over not to do on the hills. But still, at that moment, I was sure it was the smart thing to do. So I went off the path, started making my way down this rocky slope. After about 50 yards, the light seemed to be getting a little better, and I vaguely saw the path about 25 yards away. But then I slipped on some loose stones and twisted my ankle. I was furious at myself for being careless. But it wasn't too bad. I could still walk, although it was going to be slower. So I set off again. And all the time, the clouds seemed to be coming lower, so it was getting darker again. Where the path should have been, I found myself on a patch of rough grass. I could hear some sheep bleating in the distance, but I could hardly see a thing now. And I was really cold, shivering from the damp that surrounded me. I thought that I might have gone too far to the left, so I set off to the right. But then I seemed to be going back uphill, so I changed direction again and went downhill. But now the ground under my feet seemed to be getting muddy and boggy, and it was harder and harder to walk. I was getting quite worried. Up until then, I'd been sure I was okay. But now I knew I was lost. I was making slow progress, and for all I knew, it was in the wrong direction. And you do hear stories of walkers dying of exposure or whatever up on the hills, so I was right to be worried. Then I heard the voice. For a moment I thought it might just have been another sheep, but it was saying, "This way," and it was definitely a person's voice. I shouted something like, "Where are you?" But there was no answer. Then it just said again, "This way." I peered through the fog, and to my left, where the voice was coming from, I thought I could just make out a white form, a kind of human figure. It was really hard to see in the fog, but I was sure there was someone there. It shouted to me again, a man's voice. I was certain that the path wasn't that way, but I didn't know what else to do, so I walked toward the voice. I was going slowly because of my ankle, but the ground was getting less boggy now. I came back onto a rocky area, which at least meant the ground was solid to walk on, and the voice stayed ahead of me, just out of reach, saying nothing but, "This way." I kept catching a glimpse of the person, but it was always just at the point where visibility gave out. It kept on that way for a few minutes until I looked down and realised I was on the path. I was still in the fog though, and the voice said, "This way, one more time." So I set off along the path in that direction. It was uphill, but only for a slight rise, and then the path started coming downhill again, quite steeply. After another 10 minutes, the fog started to lighten. I was coming out of the clouds. It got to the point where I could see farther and farther ahead of me. There was absolutely no one there. I could see about a half mile straight down the path, and it was empty. I was still really cold, but it was much better once I was out of the fog. As I limped down a bit farther, I could look back and see the bank of thick, dark grey cloud not far above me. When I got to the bottom, it started raining heavily again, so I got soaked one more time before I got back to the village where my car was. I ended up with a bad cold and a sore ankle, but nothing worse. Later in the summer, I went back up, not to the top. I've still never been to the top, but to see where I might have been while I was lost. I found the curved path and the scree slope. It's hard to be sure, but it looked very much as though I had actually managed to walk down the slope, across the path without realising, and then onto an open field. If I had been heading downhill from there, I would have been heading for some really boggy land, and beyond that there were several little rocky cliffs and crevices. So if that's where I'd been, I was going in the worst possible direction. I wish I'd seen the angel more clearly, but I'll always be grateful to him for helping me. Carl, 56, Illinois, USA. When I started school, we used to go to and fro on a school bus, one of those old yellow buses. There was a woman called Mrs. Smith who tried to keep us all under control on the bus. Once when I was 6, I missed the bus. I went to the end of the school path where we got picked up, but I remembered I had left my painting behind. It was a painting I was particularly proud of, and I wanted to show my parents. I walked back to the art room, and the teacher was still there, so I asked for my picture. He laughed and took a few minutes to find it in the drawer. Then I walked back to the meeting place, but instead of a big group of children waiting, there was no one. The bus had come and gone, and I had missed it. Mrs. Smith must have forgotten to check that everyone was there, or maybe she just assumed I was off school for some reason. Now what I should have done was go back to the school and ask them to telephone my parents. But I felt embarrassed, as though it was a stupid thing I'd done, and I had to do something about it. Honestly, it didn't even occur to me to go back into the school. I set off to walk back home. It was about 2 miles, a long way for a 6-year-old. I knew the way because I had walked it once or twice with my mother, but I'd never been out all alone like that before, and it was a very frightening prospect. I set off walking. I knew enough to cross roads at crossings, and I didn't get lost. but it was dangerous anyway. About halfway home was a particularly big highway, and I was standing there trying to figure out how to get across. No one else seemed to be crossing, so I wasn't sure what to do. There was a break in the traffic, so I tried to cross. But suddenly a car was coming. Someone grabbed me, picked me up, and ran across the road. It was a man with dark hair. He told me that it hadn't been very clever of me to try and cross that road, said he was going to take me home. He set off with me, and he knew the way to my house. It was much faster once he was there. I only had Weet-Bix for breakfast. I don't know why it keeps repeating on me. I was better off when I didn't have breakfast, people of Earth. Dear goddess. What am I even trying to prove? Trying to be healthy and live like normal people, and it literally makes me sick. I'm such an anomaly. But anyway. It was much faster once he was there. He helped me across the roads and took all the right turnings. It didn't occur to me at the time. I was only young, but I don't know how he could have known my address. He took me to the end of my driveway and then told me to go to my parents. I walked up to the door and rang the bell, and when I looked back, he was gone. My mother started crying when I opened the door. They'd been so worried when I was on the school bus. They'd called the police and everything. I was still clinging on to my picture, and I tried to give it to her, but she just grabbed me and hugged me. It was funny because it hadn't occurred to me that there was a problem until then. Looking back, I wonder who the man was. It has always bothered me that he knew where I lived and didn't come to the door with me. So perhaps he was an angel who was there because I was in danger. 11:11 a.m. The angel sequencing numbers. Make a wish, people of Earth. Carla, 48, Illinois, USA. I was having an affair with a younger man. It all seemed glamorous and exciting. My marriage had been a little dull for a few years. Perhaps because our children had grown up and left home. I did still love my husband in a way, but I just wasn't happy on some level. So when I met this younger man, I just let it happen. I felt sure my husband would find out soon, and I was letting it drift toward that. I was like a gambler. I knew sooner or later I was going to hit rock bottom. But I was just sitting and watching it all slide away. One day, I was lying there in bed in my lover's apartment, and I had what I can only describe as a vision. I was half asleep, and I saw an angel come to fetch me. She took me with her, and we flew over my house. I saw my husband at his desk, reading his newspaper. He was quite a solid, sensible man, but when the angel showed him to me, I somehow saw him in a different light. I realised that after all we had gone through and survived together, I was betraying him. The angel brought me back to where I had been lying and left without a word. Suddenly, instead of feeling pleased with myself and excited, I felt dirty and ashamed. I vowed to change, and I did. I stopped seeing my lover and went back to my husband. That's to say, I went back to being his faithful wife, as I had been for so long. And for whatever reason, it all started to work again. Finally, we got over the malaise that we had been in since the children left. Instead of treating each other as parents without children, we discovered each other as real people. I tried to tell him once, and a strange thing happened. He stopped me before I managed to say anything and said that if I had anything bad in my past, it was in the past. He didn't need to know. Then he told me a story about how an angel had come to him once. He had thought our marriage was falling apart and had been unhappy about it. He said that he had been willing the marriage to fail because he was bored, and he felt bad about that. Somehow the angel had shown him us as we used to be, and he had vowed to start again. He said he wanted to forget all about the past, his past, my past, and start again. I couldn't help feeling he knew all about my infidelity and just didn't want us to have to talk about it. In a way, he might have been right to think that. It would only have been destructive. I might have felt I was confessing to clear the slate, but in a way my burden is that I have to live with the guilt of what I did and still try to make things work. Somehow, an angel helped us. We are much happier now than we were, and we have the angel to thank for that. I'm not sure why the angels chose to help us, but I can see that our lives would have been much more difficult if that hadn't happened. Deirdre, Christchurch, New Zealand. I was abused for about a year when I was 12. I don't want to tell you all the details, but it was my stepfather. When I told my mother about it, she refused to believe me and shouted at me for trying to spoil her happiness and drive her new husband away. It was horrible. Once my mother refused to listen, I just didn't know who else I could turn to. It kept happening, and I couldn't make it stop. Afterward, I would often feel suicidal. After all, if I wasn't around anymore, the problems would stop for me and for my mother. But I also used to hear a voice speaking to me in my head. It was a woman's voice, speaking very slowly and precisely. It used to say that things wouldn't always be like this, and that I had to keep going. It was like someone trying to cheer me up, or at least stop me from doing anything stupid. When I went back to school after the holidays, we had a new teacher, Miss McGuinness. As soon as she started, I liked her. School was a good thing at that time because I knew I was safe there. How lucky was she? I was never fucking safe at school either. Jesus. I'd come home from the predators at school to the predators at home, eat, do my homework, play on the beach, which was my only true parent and safe zone, ironically, although I did drown almost 3 times. Almost drowned 3 times. And then I'd go to sleep at night, sometimes have trouble sleeping for obvious reasons. Wake up in the morning shattered and have to go through all that again. I would not willingly come back to planet Earth if you paid me $1 trillion, quadrillion, gazillion dollars. But still, there's been Earth angels and kind people too. And I'm pushing 60 and that's a fucking miracle, people of Earth. So I'm going to have a wee little laugh about it and rejoice and look on the bright side of life and choose to be happy. It's a choice. Sometimes a labour of love. One day the teacher kept me behind after class. She asked me if everything was all right at home because my grades had gotten much worse that year, and a few of the other teachers had commented that I seemed distracted. I think most of them just put it down to adolescence. But she took the trouble to find out. I couldn't tell her anything. I knew that telling someone outside of the family would be betraying my mother. What, that evil bitch that didn't protect her? I had one like that too. Those kind of people deserve to be betrayed. But when you're a child, you don't know these things. So I just said nothing and left when she let me. But as I walked out and down the corridor, I heard the woman's voice in my head again. She was saying I had to tell Miss McGuinness. She said that the teacher would believe me and that my mother would forgive me in the end, but that it was important for me to do something. I don't know if it was an angel or some other being protecting me, but these thoughts came to me totally from the outside. They were spoken in a way that I couldn't have spoken or thought myself, a very coherent, calm, adult kind of voice. I went back and told Miss McGuinness. She was clearly very shocked, and from there it all happened very quickly. The police were called, and I went through a lot of interviews and bad things like that. It was terrible when the police took me home and arrested my stepfather. My sister, my half-sister, the lawyer, could have and should have done the same for me, but no, the bastards. But anyway, I hear she's suffering terrible from some terrible IBS illness that's slowly killing her, so I'll let it go, shall I? Can't forgive, but I'll let it go. Karma's a bitch, people of Earth. It really is a bitch. And I have my own health issues from our conjoined childhood trauma. And it's not good, people of Earth. But as my psychiatrist reminded me yesterday, I'm psychotropic free for 9 years. I've clawed to get my health back as good as it is and maybe as good as it ever shall be. I dance on the weekends with my small little tribal community that dance with me and rejoice in my small victories along the way. I have people who love me and see me and treat me with kindness and honour. I have help from the government with my little cleaning lady. Life's pretty good, you know. Life's pretty bloody good. Could be a whole lot better, but I'll just rejoice in what is right now. Even my psychiatrist said, "You're looking attractive and you're so intelligent, which is how you survived your life, Tanya." And he was just so ennobling of me yesterday, and I'm grateful for that too. My mother was absolutely distraught and wouldn't talk to me. I ended up staying for weeks with my cousin, the nearest relative I had in town, but someone I didn't really know well. My stepfather was never put in jail or anything. The evidence was just my word against his, and the police had to let him go. Isn't that evil, that they get away with it time and time again? But for some reason, the whole thing made my mother realise that I hadn't made it up, and she kicked him out. He moved out of town, to my relief, no doubt to predate on other women's children. I have never seen him again. By the way, they're always serial predators, those types, the P word. They're always serial. There's never just one child. Remember that, people of Earth, when you stand there silently enabling it. Ask yourself, how many children have they already harmed? And how many are they going to go on to harm? It took a long while before I was completely okay with my mother, but she realised I had to do something. I really think I might have killed myself or run away from home or something if I hadn't listened to that angel's voice in my head. It was a bad thing to have happen to me. Yes, it was, little one. In any case, and I find it hard to speak about it, but the voice helped me as well as I could in the circumstances. And that's the end of that rather grueling, painful 3-video stories of angels intervening to protect or to save people. The next chapter is guardian angels, and hopefully it won't be as grueling. And then the next 2 chapters are messenger angels, angels, spirit guides and ghosts, and other angelic encounters. So we're just over halfway through the book, and I just need to take a deep breath. That was rather intense and triggering because of my own childhood experiences. So, but as I said, my life is beautiful now, and I'm continuously building a beautiful life. And I fought hard on the topic of CSA on all social media platforms, and again I was often vilified and slandered and shadow banned. And it was evil what went on, but I did that work from 2013 right up until about, not sure when I stopped advocating on that topic. I think around about 2019. Then COVID came along, and so my advocacy shifted to fighting COVID, the COVID regime, the COVID insanity. But child sexual abuse is still a topic dear to my heart because I survived that too, multiple times. So, on a positive note, it's a beautiful day, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. For the love of all the gods, angels, fae, all consciousness, protect your children, no matter what, no matter who. Believe them when they tell you there's something going on. Protect them. And if you have to, take your children and escape that monster, because he's not going to change. And try to focus on the wonderful things in life, like the trees, gardens, nature, mountains, although we heard how treacherous they can be in a fog. Bad things are going to happen to you, but mitigate the bad as much as possible and stay in love with yourself and with life and expect miracles. Don't be surprised if an angel taps you on the shoulder from time to time and pushes you forward in life and gives you extra mana, power, strength and hope, and showers you with love, so much love that life becomes worth it again. Blessed be, people of Earth, from my sacred space at Titania's realm to yours.